It is time now for the Sunday Roundtable. This is the last one before the Memorial Day weekend, isn't it?
Oy.
The unofficial start of summer is right around the corner. We have a lot to get to. Joining us now is Democratic analyst Marianne Marsh, who just said oi, and Republican analyst Rob Gray. Very appropriate, by the way. Thanks for being with us, guys.
Let's start with our interview with Mike Keneally. Rob, your thoughts?
I think he did a good job in the interview. He's part of a strong field of Republican candidates, which surprised me that there are so many Republican candidates either in or circling this race, ones who can raise money and mount a real campaign and have a chance. I think they sense vulnerability in Governor Healey in terms of spending too much, energy, some of the other things that Mike Keneally talked about. Surprisingly strong signs, I think, for the GOP this early in the race.
What do you think, Marianne?
He clearly was practiced coming into this interview. He clearly made the points he wanted to make. I think the big question is, will those points get him through the primary, let alone a general election?
So let's talk about specifically what he did talk about and his thoughts on immigration. We showed you this video earlier this morning. Let's go back to it. This is the ICE operation in Worcester. You can actually hear the person on the video screaming too. People are pushing back. There was a great number of people who were pushing back. So Marianne, what's the reaction to Keneally's comments about this particular incident and the issue in whole?
If Mike Keneally wants to defend Donald Trump, he won't be governor of Massachusetts. It's that simple. What he did this morning was defend the body slamming of a woman with no apparent criminal record in front of her daughter and granddaughter by ICE and assisted by Worcester police. He's defending the fact that she was spirited out of this state. We talked about it last week. Immediately put on a plane, probably at Hanscom, and gone to Louisiana, where the tough student was brought as well, who is now free. Just like the guy in Fall River, who had no criminal record, was the wrong person. They smashed his window, and now he's free. So if he's defending Donald Trump, and he's going to have to defend Charlie Baker and both of those records, he's not going to be governor of Massachusetts.
Rob?
I think Mike Keneally takes a strong position that's most voters agree with. I mean, I look at these situations. Don't interfere with law enforcement, federal, local, state law enforcement. We saw this happen during the whole defund the police incidents and all the protests back then. And you know what? They're part of what led middle America, common sense America, to put Trump back in the White House.
These are masked men who are not identifying themselves.
They're federal law enforcement agents.
Are they? Do we know that? Have you seen their face? They're not identifying themselves. They took the woman at Tufts right off the street. They did the same to her. And then the Worcester police, who has a questionable record at best in policing, went and
look at those pictures. A lot of the controversy on this is stirred up by national paid activists who come in and run these operations.
They are local people defending local people. And when you look at the polling too, everybody opposes the way this is being done.
I think politically on this, Keneally's on very strong ground.
She's not a criminal. He said he supported criminals. So far, everyone I talked about this morning isn't a criminal.
All right, the Supreme Court heard arguments about birthright citizenship last week. Now, the president's order has been blocked by 3 separate federal judges. One of them is in Massachusetts. The Trump administration appealing, as it says parents must have permanent legal status for newborns to be citizens. Now, the case is also expected to address whether or not district judges can block a presidential policy nationwide. Rob, what are you looking for in a decision? What are you expecting?
I'm expecting the courts to back the fact that even if you're Donald Trump, you can't change the Constitution with an executive order. You can't do it. He tried to do it in reverse to Ted Cruz when he was running against him for president. Said, oh, Ted Cruz was born in Canada, even though he was born a natural-born citizen, born to a U.S. citizen mother. Trump tried to do it. He failed. He's going to fail on this.
Marianne?
Rob's right. The fact is that what Trump's really trying to do here is undermine the judiciary, not undermine the rule of law, get rid of the judiciary so he can be a dictator. Okay, that is what he's doing here. And I thought Sotomayor made that point talking about guns, and if a president came in and could take everybody's guns like the Second Amendment. One interesting point here. Ivana Trump, the first wife of Donald Trump, became a citizen in 1988. Her first 3 children, Don Jr., Ivanka, and Eric, were all born before 1988. So should they have their birthright certificates overturned? I mean, this is what we're talking about, the hypocrisy here. So he's more about becoming a dictator, and I'm sure he'll give us.
I like that. Could mess with the Trump dynasty.
Exactly.
That he supposedly wants
He
to
can't
create.
run for
Interesting.
president.
Very
Yeah,
interesting.
Right.
We turn to Health and Human Services now, and on its website, HHS says its goal is to enhance the health and well-being of all Americans. But here's what the person leading that department told Congress last week. Listen.
I don't think people should be taking medical advice from me.
People should be taking medical advice from me. Marianne, what does this tell you about health in America?
You mean the guy who swam in the Rock Creek and the sewage filled with his grandchildren? That guy?
Sewage filled, yeah.
Bobby Kennedy made his name as an anti-vaxxer and made millions of dollars off of it. Then he went before the Senate to get confirmed and lied and said he wasn't, which is, of course, a crime, lying before Senate under oath. Now he's dismantling all the scientific information that people are supposed to rely on to make their own decisions, even if you don't believe him, and that's gone too. So Bobby Kennedy is going to ensure that this country is weaker and sicker and less healthy because of him.
Rob?
He's Trump's worst appointment, just putting myths forward that have no basis in science. It's sad to see, and unfortunately, kids are getting very ill, sick, even dying, maimed for life from measles because of Kennedy and what he's spreading.
Florida's governor signed a bill banning fluoride from water. Is this a sign of things to come? What is that? It's 2 states in the union now, right?
Yeah.
Utah and Florida?
I mean, remember, everybody opposed fluoride, or tried to, in the 40s, 50s, and 60s,
Right.
because they claimed it was a communist plot to undermine the health of Americans, and here we are again.
I think, unfortunately, there's a rogue thread among some in the GOP that's anti-science, and Ron DeSantis is also part of that.
A Massachusetts executive branch hiring freeze will begin later this month. How big of an impact do you think this will have, Marianne?
Well, the red flags are starting to show, right? I mean, Maura Healey's now taking those steps. Walmart came out and said, we're not going to be able to withstand the tariffs and the uncertainty. The Michigan Consumer Confidence Index came out just on Friday. That has sunk. So it's pretty clear we know where we're going, and it's not good. The problem when those things, even if you're early, people follow you, there's a compounding effect that makes it even worse than it might have been otherwise.
Rob?
It's too little too late. I mean, I think the red flags were waving 2 years ago, and Maura Healey really should have put a lid on the budget proactively before getting to this point. It's not enough when you're increasing the budget 7-8% a year. It's way too high.
She had a lot to
sustainable.
clean up after.
Next item, millions of dollars have been spent to redevelop Copley Square, and the project is facing some criticism. Specifically, some people are calling for more green space. The city wants to use the space for large events. Marianne, did the city make a mistake? Is mistake the right word?
I went by there several days ago, and it's not finished, but it does have this sort of sterile antiseptic feel to it and not a lot of green. Not too late to put a little more in.
Don't we already have a concrete jungle for large events?
Right.
Like, do we need a second City Hall Plaza? I mean, apparently the city hasn't learned in, 4 or 5 decades of saying City Hall Plaza is terrible.
I guess they're saying there is a patch of grass that's going to
A patch and a few trees. I looked. I was there Wednesday.
We will. The images you guys have been creating in my head is just spectacular. We'll be right back.